Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to love you? Have you ever smiled through words that cut deeper than any blade? Tonight, I walked into what I thought would be just another family dinner. I had no idea that a single sentence from my mother-in-law would shatter the fragile peace I had been building for years. But sometimes, the people we least expect become our greatest defenders. And sometimes, silence breaks in the most powerful way. Before we begin this story, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to this story from. We will post new stories every day. My hands were shaking as I adjusted the pearl necklace around my neck. The mirror in our bedroom reflected a woman who looked put together, but inside I felt like I was preparing for battle. It was Thursday evening, and the warm Charleston air drifted through our open window, carrying the scent of magnolia blossoms from the garden below. My husband, Daniel, was in the bathroom, humming softly as he fixed his tie. We were getting ready for dinner at his parents' house. Again. I had been married to Daniel for 7 years. 7 years of trying to fit into a family that never quite made room for me. His mother, Patricia Hayes, had made it clear from the very beginning that I was not what she had envisioned for her son. I was not from the right family, did not attend the right schools, and did not have the right connections. I was a librarian from a modest background, and she was a woman who measured worth in country club memberships and genealogy charts. But I loved Daniel. I loved him more than I feared her disapproval. Daniel emerged from the bathroom, looking handsome in his navy suit. His brown eyes met mine in the mirror, and he smiled that warm smile that had made me fall for him all those years ago. "You look beautiful, Rebecca," he said, walking over to kiss my cheek. I turned to face him, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. "Do you think tonight will be different?" He knew exactly what I meant. Every family gathering was the same. Patricia would greet me with a tight smile, compliment something superficial about my appearance, and then spend the rest of the evening either ignoring me or making subtle comments that reminded everyone I was an outsider. "She is my mother," Daniel said with a sigh. "She can be difficult, but she loves me, and you are my wife. That should be enough. Should be." Those words hung in the air between us. We drove through the historic streets of Charleston as the sun began to set, casting golden light over the antebellum homes and oak trees draped with Spanish moss. The Hayes family lived in a grand house on Meeting Street, one of those places that looked like it belonged in a magazine about Southern elegance. White columns framed the front porch, and a perfectly manicured lawn stretched out like a green carpet. Daniel parked the car, and I took a deep breath before stepping out. The humid evening air wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I could hear voices and laughter coming from inside the house. We were not the first to arrive. "Ready?" Daniel asked, offering his hand. I took it, holding on tighter than I probably should have. The front door was already open, and we walked into the spacious foyer with its crystal chandelier and polished hardwood floors. Patricia appeared almost immediately, as if she had been waiting just around the corner. She was an elegant woman in her mid-60s, with silver hair styled in a perfect bob, and wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Daniel, darling," she said, embracing her son warmly. Then she turned to me, her smile cooling several degrees. "Rebecca, how nice of you to come. How nice of me to come, as if I were a guest and not her daughter-in-law. Thank you for having us." "Patricia," I replied, keeping my voice pleasant. She gave a small nod, and then ushered us toward the living room, where the rest of the family had gathered. Daniel's father, Robert, was there, along with Daniel's younger sister, Caroline, and her husband, James. There were also a few family friends I recognized from previous gatherings. Everyone greeted Daniel with genuine warmth. I received polite hellos and brief smiles before the conversation quickly moved on without me. I found myself standing near the fireplace, holding a glass of white wine that one of the staff had handed me. Caroline was talking animatedly about her recent vacation to Europe, and Patricia was hanging on every word, asking questions and laughing at all the right moments. I tried to join the conversation a few times, but my comments seemed to fall flat or get talked over. This was how it always went. Daniel was across the room, talking with his father and James about something related to their business. He glanced over at me once and gave me an encouraging smile. I smiled back, Even though I felt increasingly small in this grand room full of people who shared history and inside jokes that I would never be part of. "Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes, Patricia announced. I had the chef prepare something special tonight. We all moved toward the dining room, a magnificent space with a long mahogany table that could easily seat 20 people. Tonight, there were only 8 of us, but the table still felt imposing. Place cards indicated where each person should sit. I found mine near the middle of the table, between Caroline and one of the family friends, an older woman named Helen, who had known Patricia since they were girls. Daniel was seated at the opposite end of the table, next to his mother. I took my seat and folded my hands in my lap, preparing myself for what I knew would be a long meal. The first course was served, a delicate soup that tasted expensive. Conversation flowed around me, touching on topics like the upcoming charity gala, someone's grandson getting into a prestigious university, and the latest developments at the yacht club. I ate quietly, offering the occasional comment, when directly addressed, but mostly just listening. Then Patricia turned her attention to Caroline. "So, Caroline, dear, have you and James given any more thought to expanding your family? You know how much I would love more grandchildren." Caroline laughed. "We are working on it, Mother. These things take time." "Well, do not wait too long," Patricia said with a knowing smile. "Family is everything. And speaking of family," she continued, her gaze sweeping around the table, "I was thinking today about how blessed we are to have such strong family ties. The Hayes name means something in this city. It has for generations. I felt a tightness in my chest. I knew where this was going. It is important to remember where we come from," Patricia went on, her voice taking on that tone she used when she was about to make a point. "Our roots, our heritage, these things define us." She paused, taking a sip of her wine. "Which is why I have always believed that family is not just about who you marry, but about shared values, shared history, and shared understanding." The table had grown quieter. People were still eating, but I could sense the shift in attention. Patricia looked directly at me then, her eyes cold despite her smile. "Some people can marry into a family, but that does not necessarily make them family. Not truly. Not in the way that matters." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face flush hot, and my hand trembled slightly as I set down my spoon. Around the table, there was an uncomfortable silence. Caroline looked down at her plate. Helen cleared her throat awkwardly. Robert seemed to be studying his wine glass with sudden intensity. Daniel had heard it too. I could see his jaw tighten from across the table. "Mother, what exactly are you saying?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "I am simply making an observation. Daniel, we all know that family is complicated. Some people fit naturally, and others, well, they remain outsiders no matter how much time passes." I could not breathe. The room felt like it was closing in on me. All those years of trying, of biting my tongue, of pretending that her cold comments did not hurt, came crashing down in that single moment. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to leave. I wanted to disappear. But I sat there, frozen, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me, and the crushing realization that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for this woman. Daniel stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That is enough," he said, his voice low but firm. Patricia looked at him with surprise. "Daniel, sit down. I was simply—" "No," he interrupted, his eyes blazing. "You were not simply doing anything. You were deliberately hurting my wife. In front of everyone." The room was completely silent now. "Rebecca is my family," Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. "She is my wife. She has been nothing but kind and patient with you for 7 years, and you have done nothing but make her feel unwelcome in a family she married." And to Ma, Patricia's face had gone pale. "Daniel, you are overreacting." "Am I?" he asked. "Because from where I am standing, you just told my wife, in front of our family and friends, that she will never truly belong, that she is an outsider, that she does not matter." Tears were burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Daniel walked around the table and came to stand beside me. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt the warmth of his touch through the fabric of my dress. "If Rebecca is not family, Then neither am I, he said quietly. Because where she goes, I go. Patricia stood up, her composure cracking. Daniel, you are being ridiculous. I am your mother, and she is my wife, he replied, and I will not sit here and watch you disrespect her anymore. He looked down at me. Rebecca, let us go home. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We walked out of that dining room together, leaving behind the stunned silence and Patricia's shocked expression. As we stepped out into the warm Charleston night, I finally let the tears fall. Daniel held me close, and for the first time in 7 years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be different. We drove home in silence, but it was not the uncomfortable silence I had grown used to over the years. This silence felt different. It felt like something had shifted, like a wall had finally come down. Daniel kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other holding mine, his thumb gently rubbing circles on my skin. When we pulled into the driveway of our small house in the Garden District, I finally found my voice. You did not have to do that, I whispered. Daniel turned off the engine and looked at me, his eyes soft but determined. Yes, I did. I should have done it a long time ago. We went inside, and I kicked off my heels by the door, feeling the cool, hardwood floor beneath my feet. Our home was modest compared to the Hayes estate, but it was ours. Every piece of furniture, every photograph on the wall, every book on the shelf represented something we had chosen together. I sank onto the couch, and Daniel sat beside me, pulling me close. I am sorry, Rebecca, he said quietly. I am so sorry. For all the times I told you to be patient, to give her time, to understand that she just needed to adjust. I was making excuses for behavior that was inexcusable. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Do you want to know when it started? I asked. When I first realized she would never accept me. He nodded, his arms tightening around me. It was the day we got engaged, I began, my voice steady despite the memories flooding back. Do you remember? You proposed to me at Waterfront Park, right at sunset. It was the happiest moment of my life. I remember, Daniel said softly. You were wearing that blue dress, and when you said yes, you started laughing and crying at the same time. I smiled at the memory, even though what came next was painful. We went straight to your parents' house to tell them the news. You were so excited. You kept saying how happy your mother would be, how she had been asking when you were going to settle down. Daniel was quiet now, and I knew he was remembering too. When we walked in, your father congratulated us right away. He shook your hand and gave me a hug. He seemed genuinely pleased. But your mother, I paused, feeling the old hurt rise up again. She looked at my hand, at the ring you had chosen so carefully, and the first thing she, said was, "Oh, how quaint." I heard Daniel inhale sharply. Then she asked if we had set a date. I continued. When you said we were thinking about next spring, she said that was awfully fast, that perhaps we should wait and make sure we were making the right decision. She did not say it directly, but the implication was clear. She thought I was not the right decision. Rebecca, Daniel started, but I needed to finish. The next few months were worse. Every time we visited to discuss wedding plans, she found something to criticize. The venue I liked was not prestigious enough. The flowers I wanted were too common. The dress I chose was not elegant enough for a Hayes wedding. She kept saying that word, Hayes, as if the family name was something sacred, that I was somehow tarnishing. I pulled back slightly so I could look at Daniel's face. I tried so hard to please her. I changed the venue to the one she suggested. I let her pick the flowers. I even changed my dress to something more traditional because she said the one I loved was too modern. And do you know what she said on our wedding day? Daniel shook his head, his jaw clenched. She told me I looked acceptable. Not beautiful, not lovely, acceptable. Like I had barely met the minimum standard to marry her son. I am so sorry, Daniel said, and I could see the pain in his eyes. I should have seen it. I should have stood up for you from the beginning. You loved your mother, I said gently. You wanted to believe the best of her. I understand that. I wanted to believe it too. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our small garden where fireflies were beginning to dance in the darkness. The years after the wedding were not any easier. I continued. Every holiday, and every birthday, every family gathering, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. I tried to dress the way she expected, talk about the things she found interesting, laugh at the right moments, but nothing was ever enough. I turned back to face Daniel. "Do you remember the Christmas dinner 3 years ago?" His expression darkened. "When she gave gifts to everyone except you?" I nodded. She handed out beautifully wrapped presents to every single person at that table. Your father got a new watch. Caroline got jewelry. Even James, who had only been part of the family for 6 months at that point, got a gift. But when she got to me, she just smiled and said she had not found anything appropriate yet. Daniel stood up and came to me, taking my hands in his. "I remember," he said. "I remember you smiled and said it was fine, that you understood. But I saw your face later that night when you thought I was asleep. You were crying. I admitted, because it was not about the gift. It was about what it represented. She gave a gift to James, who was practically a stranger, but not to me. She was sending a message that even after all those years, I was still not really part of the family." "What else?" Daniel asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Tell me everything. I need to know." I took a deep breath. There were so many small moments, Daniel. The time she introduced me to her friends at the charity gala as your wife, but never by my name, as if my identity did not matter. The time she planned a family vacation and forgot to include me in the head count, then acted surprised when I showed up. The time she redecorated your old bedroom in their house and removed all the photos of us together, replacing them with pictures of just you and Caroline. Each memory felt like opening an old wound, but there was also something freeing about finally saying it all out loud. And then there were the comments. I continued. They were always subtle, always phrased in a way that gave her plausibility if anyone called her out. She would say things like, "I am sure you tried your best, dear, when I brought a dish to a family dinner," or, "That is an interesting choice," when I wore something she did not approve of, or my personal favorite, "We do things a certain way in this family," whenever I suggested anything different. Daniel was shaking his head, his face a mixture of anger and guilt. How did I not see this? How did I let this go on for so long? "Because you are a good person who loves your mother," I said simply, "and because she was careful. She never said anything overtly cruel when you were paying attention. She saved her worst comments for moments when you were out of the room or distracted. And I never told you the full extent of it, because I did not want to put you in the middle. I did not want to be the wife who made her husband choose between her and his mother. But that is exactly what she forced me to do tonight," Daniel said bitterly. "And it was the easiest choice I have ever made." He pulled me close again, and we stood there in our living room, holding each other as the weight of 7 years of hurt and silence finally began to lift. "Tell me how we got here," I said quietly. "Tell me about the beginning, before all of this. I need to remember the good parts." Daniel smiled, and I could see some of the tension leave his face. "You want to hear about the day we met?" I nodded, settling back onto the couch with him. "It was at the main library downtown," he began, and I could hear the warmth returning to his voice. "I had gone there to research some historical property records for a case I was working on. I had no idea how to navigate the archives, and I was getting increasingly frustrated. Then you appeared, like some kind of angel of organization." I laughed softly. "I was just doing my job." "You were amazing," he insisted. "You knew exactly where to find what I needed. You showed me how to use the microfiche machine, helped me locate documents I did not even know existed, and you made it all seem effortless. And the whole time, I was trying to work up the courage to ask you out. You were terrible at it," I teased. "You kept asking me strange questions about the Dewey Decimal System. I was nervous." He defended himself, grinning. "You were beautiful and smart and way out of my league. I thought if I could keep you talking about library science, maybe you would not notice what a mess I was." "I did notice," I said, "but I thought it was charming. Most people who came to the library treated me like I was invisible, just someone to point them in the right direction. But you actually listened when I talked. You asked follow-up questions. You seemed genuinely interested." Daniel said. "I came back to that library every week for 2 months, always finding some excuse to need your help. My colleagues thought I had developed an obsession with local history. I remember," I said, smiling at the memory, "you checked out so many books about Charleston architecture. I started to think you were writing a dissertation or something. Finally, I got up the nerve to ask you to coffee, he continued. I had rehearsed what I was going to say about 100 times, but when the moment came, I just blurted out, "Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime?" And you looked at me with those beautiful eyes and said yes. I thought you would never ask. We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like we were back at the beginning, before family drama and hurt feelings had complicated everything. Our first date was at that little coffee shop on King Street, I said. We talked for 4 hours. Do you remember what you told me that day? Daniel nodded. I told you that I had never met anyone who made me feel so comfortable being myself, that with you, I did not have to pretend or perform. I could just be Daniel, not Daniel Hayes of the Charleston Hayes. And I told you that I had never met anyone who saw me as more than just a librarian from a working-class background, I added. You made me feel like I was interesting, like my thoughts and opinions mattered. They do matter, Daniel said, firmly. They have always mattered. I wish your mother felt the same way. He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing everything. Then he spoke, his voice thoughtful. I think part of the problem is that my mother has always cared too much about appearances and status. She grew up in a time and place where those things were considered important. Her own mother was the same way. It is like this toxic cycle that gets passed down. That does not excuse her behavior, I said gently. No, it does not, he agreed. Understanding where it comes from does not make it acceptable. She has hurt you, Rebecca. She has made you feel unwelcome and unloved in a family you should have been embraced by from the start. And I let it happen because I kept hoping she would change, that she would eventually see how wonderful you are. A pause in the story to ask you, are you enjoying this account so far? Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We will post new stories every day. Thank you. Let us continue. What happens now? I asked. Your mother is not going to change overnight. If anything, she is probably even angrier now that you stood up to her. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently playing with my hair. Then he spoke, his voice filled with a determination I had not heard before. Tomorrow, I am going to call my mother. I am going to tell her that what she said tonight was unacceptable and hurtful. I am going to make it clear that if she wants to have a relationship with me, she needs to treat you with the respect you deserve. And if she refuses, I asked, even though I was afraid of the answer, then we will create some distance. He said simply, I love my mother, but I love you more, and I will not allow anyone, not even her, to make you feel less than the incredible person you are. I felt tears welling up again, but this time, they were different. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of finally feeling truly seen and defended. We sat there together as the night grew deeper, talking about everything and nothing, rebuilding the foundation of trust that had been shaken by years of quiet suffering. And for the first time, in a very long time, I felt hope that things might actually change. But in the back of my mind, I knew that confronting Patricia Hayes would not be simple. She was a woman who was used to getting her way, a woman who valued control and appearances above almost everything else. And I knew that when Daniel called her tomorrow, we would be opening a door to a confrontation that had been building for 7 years. I just hoped we were ready for what came next. The next morning arrived too quickly. I woke up to sunlight streaming through our bedroom curtains and the sound of Daniel already moving around downstairs. For a brief, blissful moment, I had forgotten about the previous night. Then it all came rushing back. The humiliation at the dinner table, Patricia's cold words, and Daniel's powerful defense of me. I got out of bed and pulled on my robe, then made my way down to the kitchen. Daniel was standing by the counter, staring at his phone with an expression I could not quite read. He was still in his pajama pants and an old college shirt, his hair messy from sleep. Morning, I said softly. He looked up and gave me a weak smile. Morning. I made coffee. I poured myself a cup and joined him at the kitchen table. The morning sun cast warm patterns across the wooden surface, and outside our window, I could hear birds singing in the oak tree. It should have been a peaceful morning, but tension hung in the air between us. Have you talked to her yet? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Daniel shook his head. I have been trying to figure out what to say. Every time I start to dial her number, I get angry all over again. Maybe you should wait until you are calmer, I suggested. even though part of me wanted him to call right. Away and get it over with. No, he said firmly. If I wait, I might talk myself out of it. Or worse, I might soften what I need to say. She needs to hear this now, while it is still fresh. He picked up his phone, and I watched as he scrolled to his mother's contact. His finger hovered over the call button for several seconds before he finally pressed it. The phone rang 3 times before Patricia answered. Her voice came through, clearly, and I could hear the tension in it even from where I sat. "Daniel," she said, "I suppose you are calling to apologize for your behavior last night." I felt my stomach tighten. Of course she would expect an apology from him. "No, Mother," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I am calling because we need to have a serious conversation about the way you have been treating Rebecca." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I do not know what you mean," Patricia said coolly. "I have always been perfectly civil to your wife. Civil is not the same as welcoming," Daniel replied. "And last night, you were not even civil. You told her, in front of our entire family, that she would never truly be part of this family." "I was simply stating a fact," Patricia said, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Some people marry into families, but that does not mean they share our values or our heritage." "Our heritage?" Daniel's voice rose slightly. "Mother, you are talking about my wife like she is some kind of outsider who does not deserve to be here. She has been nothing but patient and kind to you for 7 years. 7 years of you making subtle comments, leaving her out of family events, and treating her like she is not good enough for us. That is not fair," Patricia protested. "I have included her in everything." "You gave everyone Christmas gifts except her," Daniel said, his voice hard. "You introduced her to your friends without using her name. You planned a family vacation and forgot to count her in the reservations. Do not tell me you have included her when your actions say otherwise." The line was silent for a moment, and I could imagine Patricia sitting in her pristine living room, her face tight with anger and perhaps a hint of shame. "I have always done what I thought was best for this family," she finally said. "When you brought Rebecca home, I had concerns. She did not come from our world, Daniel. She did not understand our traditions or our expectations. She did not need to come from our world," Daniel shot back. "She just needed to be loved and accepted by the man she married and his family. But you made that impossible." I heard Patricia take a sharp breath. "You are being very disrespectful right now. And you have been disrespectful to my wife for 7 years," Daniel said. "The difference is that I am finally calling you out on it. If this is how you are going to speak to me, perhaps we should not speak at all," Patricia said coldly. "If that is what it takes for you to understand how serious I am, then so be it," Daniel replied. "I love you, Mother, but I will not allow you to continue hurting the woman I love. If you cannot treat Rebecca with the respect and kindness she deserves, then we will need to reevaluate our relationship." There was another long silence, and then Patricia spoke, her voice tight. "I see. Well, I suppose I know where I stand now. You have made your choice." "I have," Daniel said quietly. "I chose Rebecca the day I asked her to marry me. I should have made that clearer a long time ago." Patricia hung up without another word. Daniel set his phone down on the table and let out a long breath. His hands were shaking slightly, and I reached across to take one of them in mine. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I think so. That was harder than I expected, but it needed to be done." "What do you think she will do now?" Daniel shrugged. "Knowing my mother, she will probably retreat and sulk for a while. She is not used to being challenged, especially not by me. But maybe, just maybe, this will make her think about her behavior." I wanted to believe that, but I had my doubts. Patricia Hayes was a proud woman, and I could not imagine her easily admitting she had been wrong. The rest of the day passed quietly. Daniel tried to work from home, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. I went through the motions of my own work, responding to emails, and organizing some files for the library, but I felt distracted and uneasy. Around mid-afternoon, Daniel's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It is my father," he said. He answered, and I could hear Robert Hayes's deep voice on the other end, though I could not make out the words. "Yes, Dad, I know," Daniel said. "Yes, she told you. I am sure she did." He listened for a few minutes, his expression growing more and more tense, Dad, with all due respect, you were there last night. You heard what she said to Rebecca. Are you really going to defend that? More talking from Robert. I understand that she is upset, Daniel continued, but she has been upsetting my wife for years, and nobody seemed to care about that. A longer pause as Robert spoke. Look, Dad, I am not asking you to take sides. I am just asking you to understand why I had to say something. Rebecca is my wife. She deserves better than what she's been getting from this family. Another pause. I appreciate that, Dad. I really do. But this is not about making peace right now. This is about establishing boundaries and making sure Rebecca knows that I will always stand up for her. When Daniel finally hung up, he looked exhausted. What did he say? I asked. He rubbed his face with both hands. He said Mom is very upset. She feels like I chose you over her, which apparently is the worst thing a son can do. He asked me to apologize and smooth things over. And what did you tell him? That I am not going to apologize for defending my wife. He said he understands, but I could tell he is caught in the middle and does not like it. I felt a pang of guilt. I never wanted to cause problems between you and your family. Daniel came over and knelt in front of my chair, taking both my hands in his. Rebecca, look at me. You did not cause this. My mother caused this with years of behavior that should never have been tolerated. You have been the victim here, not the problem. I nodded, but the guilt did not completely go away. That evening, as we were making dinner together, Daniel's phone rang again. This time it was Caroline. Hey, Caroline, he answered, putting the call on speaker so I could hear. Daniel, what is going on? Caroline's voice sounded concerned. Mom called me in tears. She said you yelled at her and told her you never wanted to see her again. That is not what happened, Daniel said firmly. I called her to discuss the way she has been treating Rebecca. And yes, I was direct with her, but I did not yell, and I certainly did not say I never wanted to see her again. She seems to think you meant it that way, Caroline said. James and I are worried. We have never seen her this upset. I took a deep breath and decided to speak up. Caroline, this is Rebecca. Can I say something? Of course, Caroline said, her voice softening slightly. I know this is difficult for everyone. I began. I never wanted to cause problems in your family, but your mother said something last night that really hurt me. She made it clear that she does not consider me part of this family, no matter how many years pass. And Daniel stood up for me, which is what any husband should do for his wife. There was a pause, and then Caroline spoke quietly. I know Mom can be difficult. She has very specific ideas about how things should be, but she is not a bad person, Rebecca. I never said she was, I replied. But being a good person does not give someone the right to make others feel unwelcome and unworthy. I have tried, for 7 years, to be accepted by her Guy, and nothing I do is ever enough. Caroline sighed. I saw what happened at dinner last night. I am not going to lie. It was uncomfortable. But Mom is proud. She is not going to apologize easily. Then maybe she needs more time to think about what she did, Daniel said. Caroline, I love Mom, but I love my wife more, and I am not going to pretend that everything is fine when it is not. What do you want me to do? Caroline asked. Just give us some space, Daniel said. We are not cutting Mom out of our lives permanently. We are just establishing that there need to be some changes in how she treats Rebecca. Okay, Caroline said. I understand. And Rebecca, for what it is worth, I am sorry you have felt this way. I should have said something before now. Thank you, I said, surprised by her words. After Caroline hung up, Daniel and I stood in the kitchen, the pasta boiling on the stove forgotten for a moment. Your sister surprised me, I admitted. She has always been kinder than she lets on, Daniel said. I think she has seen how Mom treats you, but did not know how to address it without causing family drama. Well, we certainly have drama now, I said with a weak laugh. The next few days were strange. Daniel and I went about our normal routines, but there was an undercurrent of tension as we waited to see what would happen next. Patricia did not call. Robert sent a few text messages to Daniel, mostly asking how he was doing but carefully avoiding the topic of the confrontation. Then, on the 4th day after the disastrous dinner, something unexpected happened. I was at work at the library, helping a teenager find books for a school project, when my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my heart skip a beat. It was from Patricia. The message was short. We need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow at 10? I stared at the message for a long moment, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from whatever new hurt she might inflict. But another part of me was curious. Was she ready to apologize? Or was this just another opportunity for her to make me feel small? I texted, Daniel, immediately. Your mother just asked to meet me for coffee tomorrow. What should I do? His response came quickly. What do you want to do? I thought about it. What did I want? I wanted resolution. I wanted to stop feeling like an outsider in my own family. I wanted Patricia to see me as a person, not as some inappropriate choice her son had made. I think I need to meet her. I texted back. But I am scared. Do you want me to come? With you, Daniel offered. I considered it, but then realized that if Patricia and I were ever going to have any kind of real relationship, we needed to have this conversation without Daniel as a buffer. No, I texted. I need to do this alone. Okay, he replied. But call me if you need me. I can be there in 10 minutes. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining different scenarios of how the meeting might go. Would Patricia apologize? Would she double down on her position? Would she try to manipulate me into apologizing to her? By the time morning came, I felt exhausted and anxious. I chose my outfit carefully, settling on a simple navy dress that was professional but not overly formal. I wanted to look put together without seeming like I was trying too hard. The coffee shop Patricia had suggested was a small, upscale place in the historic district, the kind of establishment where the coffee cost $8 and came with a little biscotti on the side. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table near the window where I could see her coming. Patricia arrived exactly on time, dressed in a cream blouse and tailored pants, her silver hair perfectly styled as always. She saw me and paused for just a moment before walking over. Rebecca, she said with a nod. Patricia, I replied. She sat down across from me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. A waitress came over, and we both ordered coffee, buying ourselves a few more moments of silence. When the waitress left, Patricia folded her hands on the table and looked at me directly for the first time. I suppose you are wondering why I asked you here, she began. The thought crossed my mind, I said carefully. She took a breath, and I could see something in her expression that I had never seen before. It almost looked like uncertainty. What she said next would change everything. Patricia looked down at her hands, and for the first time since I had known her, she seemed almost vulnerable. The confident, controlling woman who had made me feel so small for so many years suddenly looked older, more fragile. I have been doing a lot of thinking since the dinner, she began, her voice quieter than usual. About what Daniel said, about what you must think of me. I stayed silent, waiting. I had learned over the years that Patricia liked to control conversations, and interrupting her would only give her an excuse to deflect. The waitress brought our coffee, and Patricia thanked her with a tight smile. She took a sip, then set the cup down carefully on the saucer. I want you to understand something, Rebecca, she continued. I grew up in a very different world than you did. My mother was extremely particular about social standing, about appearances, about maintaining the family reputation. She taught me that who you associated with, who you married, these things mattered tremendously. I nodded slightly, still not speaking. When Daniel brought you home, Patricia went on, I saw someone who did not fit the picture I had in my mind for his future. You were not from the same social circles. You did not have the connections I thought would benefit him professionally, and I worried that he was making a mistake. Those words stung, even though I had suspected them all along. But here is what I did not see, she said, and her voice wavered slightly. I did not see how happy you made him. I did not see how you supported him through difficult times at work. I did not see how you made our family gatherings warmer. Just by being kind to everyone, even when I was cold to you. I felt tears starting to form, but I blinked them back. I would not cry in front of Patricia Hayes. Not yet. I have spent the last few days thinking about every interaction we have had, she continued, and I am ashamed to say that Daniel was right. I have been cruel to you. Not in obvious ways, but in small, deliberate ways that I told myself did not really matter. But they did matter. They mattered to you, and they should have mattered to me. She looked up then, meeting my eyes, and I saw something I had never expected to see there. Remorse. I owe you an apology, Rebecca, she said. A real one. I am sorry for making you feel unwelcome. I am sorry for the Christmas when I did not give you a gift. I am sorry for every subtle comment and every time I made you feel like you were not good enough. You did not deserve any of that. I sat there, completely stunned. This was not at all what I had expected. I had prepared myself for excuses, for justifications, for her to somehow turn this around and make it my fault. But this genuine apology, I had no preparation for this. Thank you, I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia took another sip of her coffee, and I could see her hands were trembling slightly. I do not expect you to forgive me right away, she said. I know trust is not rebuilt in a single conversation, but I want you to know that I am going to try to do better. I am going to try to see you the way Daniel sees you. Why now? I asked, finding my voice. What changed? She was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Honestly, seeing Daniel so angry with me was a wake-up call. He has always been my gentle boy, the one who tried to keep peace in the family. But the other night, he was willing to walk away from me to protect you, and I realized that if I continued on this path, I was going to lose my son. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me was glad she was finally acknowledging her behavior, but another part of me was disappointed that it had taken the threat of losing Daniel to make her change, rather than simply recognizing that she had been hurting another human being. I appreciate your apology, I said carefully, but I need you to understand something too. This cannot just be about not wanting to lose Daniel. If you are going to change how you treat me, it needs to be because you genuinely want to have a relationship with me, not just because you are afraid of losing your son. Patricia nodded slowly. You are right, and I am not going to sit here and pretend I have some deep affection for you that suddenly appeared overnight. I do not know you very well, Rebecca, and that is my fault. I never gave us a chance to actually get to know each other because I was so focused on what I thought you were not. So what are you proposing? I asked. She took a deep breath. I am proposing that we start over. Not completely. We cannot erase the past 7 years, but maybe we can build something new from here. Maybe. We could have lunch together sometimes. Just the two of us. Maybe we could actually have conversations where I listen instead of judge. I considered this. It was more than I had ever expected from her, but I was also wary. Patricia was skilled at saying the right things when it suited her purposes. How could I know this was genuine and not just another manipulation? As if reading my thoughts, Patricia spoke again. I know you have no reason to trust me. I understand that, but I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that I mean what I am saying. I will think about it, I said. I cannot promise anything right now, Patricia. You hurt me deeply, and that does not just go away because you apologized. I understand, she said. Take all the time you need. We sat in silence for a few moments, both of us sipping our coffee. It was not comfortable, but it was not as hostile as I had expected either. Can I ask you something? Patricia said eventually. I nodded. What made you fall in love with Daniel? The question surprised me. It was personal in a way Patricia had never been with me before. I thought about it for a moment, wanting to give an honest answer. He made me feel seen, I said. I spent so much of my life feeling invisible, just the librarian behind the desk. But Daniel looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. He asked about my thoughts, my dreams, my opinions on things. He made me feel like I mattered. Patricia was quiet, and when I looked at her, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. He has always been good at that, she said softly. Even as a boy, he was the one who noticed when people were hurting or feeling left out. He would invite the lonely kid to play, or comfort his sister when she was upset. I always thought he was too sensitive, that the world would be hard on someone with such a gentle heart. I think his sensitivity is one of his greatest strengths, I said. The world needs more people who notice when others are hurting. Patricia nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right. We talked for another 20 minutes, and while it was not easy or completely comfortable, it felt like a beginning. Patricia asked me about my work at the library, and for once, she seemed genuinely interested in my answers. I asked her about the charity work she did, and she opened up a bit about why it was important to her. When we finally stood to leave, Patricia did something completely unexpected. She reached out and briefly touched my arm. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I know it took courage. Thank you for apologizing. I replied. I drove home, feeling emotionally exhausted, but also cautiously hopeful. When I walked in the door, Daniel was waiting, practically pacing in the living room. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. I told him everything, from Patricia's apology to her explanation, to her proposal that we start building a new relationship. He listened intently, his expression shifting between relief and residual anger. "Do you believe her?" he asked when I finished. "I honestly do not know yet," I admitted, "but I think she was sincere in the moment. Whether that translates to actual change over time, we will have to wait and see." Daniel pulled me into a hug. "I am proud of you for meeting with her. That could not have been easy." "It was not," I said, resting my head against his chest, but it felt like something that needed to happen. Over the next week, things seemed to settle into a cautious new normal. Patricia sent me a text message a few days after our coffee meeting, asking if I would like to have lunch the following week. I agreed, and we met at a small restaurant downtown. This lunch was less emotionally intense than the coffee had been. We talked about normal things, books I was reading, a play she had seen recently, the weather. It felt strange, like we were two acquaintances getting to know each other for the first time, but there was still an underlying tension. I kept waiting for her to say something cutting, to slip back into her old patterns, and I could tell she was being very careful with her words, as if she was afraid of saying the wrong thing and undoing all her progress. Daniel remained supportive but watchful. He was glad his mother was making an effort, but he made it clear to both of us that if she reverted to her old behavior, he would not hesitate to establish boundaries again. Caroline reached out to me as well, inviting me to go shopping with her one Saturday. It was the first time she had ever extended an invitation to me without it being a family obligation. "I am glad Mom is trying," Caroline said as we browsed through a boutique. "I know she has not always been easy to deal with." "That is putting it mildly," I said with a small smile. Caroline laughed. "Fair. Enough. Look, I am sorry I did not stand up for you before. I saw how she treated you, but I convinced myself it was not my place to get involved. That was wrong of me. I appreciate you saying that," I said. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like I was starting to have real relationships with Daniel's family members, not just polite, surface-level interactions. But then, 2 weeks after my coffee meeting with Patricia, something happened that threatened to undo all the fragile progress we had made. It was a Thursday evening, and Daniel and I were having dinner at home when his phone rang. It was his father. "Dad, what is wrong?" Daniel answered, immediately picking up on something in his father's tone. I could not hear what Robert was saying, but I watched Daniel's face grow increasingly concerned. "When?" Daniel asked. "How bad is it?" More talking from Robert. "Okay, we will be right there," Daniel said, standing up. "What happened?" I asked, my heart starting to race. "My mother collapsed at home," Daniel said, grabbing his keys. "They are taking her to the hospital. We need to go now." We drove to the hospital in tense silence, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this serious? Was Patricia going to be okay? When we arrived at the emergency room, we found Robert and Caroline in the waiting area. Robert looked pale and shaken, more emotional than I had ever seen him. "What happened?" Daniel asked, embracing his father. "She was feeling unwell all day, but insisted it was nothing," Robert explained. "Then she collapsed in the kitchen. The doctors are with her now. They think it might be her heart." We sat in the waiting room for what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes. Finally, a doctor came, out to speak with us. "Mrs. Hayes had a cardiac event," the doctor explained. "We have stabilized her, but we need to run more tests. She is going to need to make some significant lifestyle changes and possibly have a procedure done. But the good news is that we caught it in time." "Can we see her?" Robert asked. "One at a time," the doctor said, "and only for a few minutes. She needs rest." Robert went in first, then Caroline. When it was Daniel's turn, he squeezed my hand before walking through the doors to the intensive care unit. I sat alone in the waiting room, my emotions churning. Despite everything Patricia had put me through, I did not want her to be seriously ill, and I could not help but think about our recent coffee meetings and lunches, about the tentative steps we had been taking toward a real relationship. When Daniel came back out, his eyes were red. "She wants to see you," he said quietly. Me? I asked, surprised. He nodded. She specifically asked for you. I walked through the doors into the intensive care unit, my heart pounding. A nurse directed me to Patricia's room, and I pushed open the door slowly. Patricia was lying in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile in a way I had never seen before. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her face was pale, but her eyes were alert, and they locked onto mine as soon as I entered. "Rebecca," she said, her voice hoarse. "Come here." I approached the bed, unsure what to expect. "I need to tell you something," she said. "When I collapsed today, when I thought I might be facing the end, do you know what I thought about?" I shook my head. I thought about how much time I wasted being cruel to you. I thought about all the moments I could have spent getting to know you, building a relationship with you, and instead I pushed you away, and I was filled with regret. Tears were streaming down her face now, and I felt my own eyes filling up. "Life is too short, Rebecca," she continued. "It is too short to hold on to pride and prejudice. It is too short to let fear and snobbery keep us from loving the people who matter. You matter. You have always mattered, and I was too stubborn and foolish to see it." She reached out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. "I meant what I said at the coffee shop," she said. "I want to do better. I want to be better. And if you will give me that chance, I promise I will not waste it." "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." We sat there for a few moments, holding hands, both of us crying. It was not a perfect resolution, and I knew there would still be difficult moments ahead, but it felt like something had fundamentally shifted between us. When I left her room and returned to the waiting area, Daniel searched my face for clues about what had happened. "She is going to be okay," I said, "and I think we are going to be okay too." He pulled me close, and I felt some of the tension that had been living in my chest for 7 years finally begin to ease. But even as I stood there in Daniel's arms, I could not help but wonder what would come next. Patricia's health scare had brought a moment of clarity and emotional honesty, but would it last? Or would she return to her old patterns once she recovered? Only time would tell. But for now, in this moment, there was hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to build on. A pause in the story to remind you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to this story from. We will post new stories every day. Thank you. Let us continue. Patricia spent 3 days in the hospital. During that time, our family dynamics shifted in ways I never could have imagined. Daniel and I visited her every day, sometimes together, and sometimes separately. Robert was there constantly, looking exhausted, but refusing to leave his wife's side for long. Caroline came by in the evenings after work, bringing flowers and magazines. But what surprised me most was how Patricia responded to my visits. When I came alone, she actually talked to me. Not the polite, surface-level conversation we had shared at our recent lunches, but real, meaningful dialogue. On the second day, I brought her some books from the library, thinking she might be bored. Her face lit up when she saw them. "You remembered?" she said, picking up one of the historical fiction novels. I mentioned at lunch that I enjoyed this author. "I did remember," I said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I thought you might need something to pass the time." She looked at me for a long moment. "You are thoughtful, Rebecca. I do not think I ever acknowledged that before." Over the next hour, we talked about books, about her childhood, about things that mattered to her. She told me about growing up with a mother who valued appearance over authenticity, who taught her that love was conditional and had to be earned through perfect behavior and proper choices. "I spent my whole life trying to please a woman who was never satisfied," Patricia said quietly. "And then I became that woman. I repeated the same patterns with my own children and with you. That must have been exhausting," I said gently. "It was," she admitted. "It still is. But I am tired of living that way. This health scare made me realize that I do not want to leave this world having pushed away the people who could have brought me joy." On the 3rd day, the doctors cleared Patricia to go home with strict instructions about medication, diet, and stress management. As Daniel and Robert helped her get ready to leave, she called me over. "Rebecca, will you come to the house tomorrow?" she asked. "I would like to talk with you and Daniel together." "Of course," I said, though I felt a flutter of nervousness. The next afternoon, Daniel and I drove to the Hayes estate. It felt different this time, less imposing, and more like just a house. Patricia was resting on the sofa in the living room when we arrived, looking much better than she had in the hospital, but still fragile. Robert brought us tea, and we all sat down. Patricia had insisted he be there too. I asked you both to come. Because I need to say some things, Patricia began. And Robert needs to hear them as well because he has enabled my behavior for too long. Robert looked uncomfortable but nodded. Rebecca, Patricia continued, turning to me. I have apologized to you privately, but I need to do it in front of my family as well. I have treated you terribly for 7 years. I made you feel unwelcome in this family, and I did it deliberately because I was too proud to admit that my son had chosen better than I gave him credit for. Daniel reached over and took my hand. I convinced myself that I was protecting Daniel, Patricia went on, that I was upholding family standards and traditions. But what I was really doing was trying to maintain control. I was afraid that if Daniel married someone outside our social circle, it would somehow diminish us. But the only person who has been diminished by my actions is me. She paused, taking a sip of her tea with trembling hands. I want you to know that from this moment forward, you are not just my daughter-in-law. You are my daughter. You are family in every sense of the word. And I am going to prove that to you through my actions, not just my words. I felt tears streaming down my face. Thank you, I managed to say. Robert cleared his throat. I owe you an apology too, Rebecca. I knew Patricia was being unfair to you, and I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. I am sorry. Daniel spoke then, his voice thick with emotion. I am grateful that we are having this conversation, but I need both of you to understand that if things slip back to the way they were, Rebecca and I will not hesitate to create distance again. This is not just about words. It is about sustained change. We understand, Patricia said, and we are committed to making that change. Over the following weeks, Patricia proved she meant what she said. She invited me to lunch twice a week, just the two of us. She asked about my work and actually listened to my answers. She shared stories from her own life, revealing vulnerabilities I never knew existed. One afternoon, about a month after her health scare, we were having lunch at her house when she brought out a box of old photographs. I want to show you something, she said, sitting beside me on the sofa. These are pictures from when I was your age. She pulled out a faded photograph of a young woman in her 30s, smiling nervously at the camera. The woman looked like Patricia but softer, less guarded. That was taken right after I married into the Hayes family, Patricia explained. I was terrified. Robert's mother was very particular about how things should be done, and I felt like I could never measure up. I looked at her in surprise. I had always assumed Patricia had been born into this world of privilege and social standing. No, she said, reading my expression. I came from a respectable family, but we were not wealthy like the Hayes. I had to learn how to fit in, how to dress correctly, how to speak properly, how to entertain. And Robert's mother never let me forget that I was not born into it. That must have been so hard, I said. It was, Patricia admitted. And instead of remembering how that felt when you came into this family, I became the very person who had made my life difficult. I became my mother-in-law. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I am so sorry, Rebecca. You deserved so much better. We sat there together, two women from different backgrounds who had both struggled to find their place in the same family. And in that moment, I felt genuine compassion for her. As the months passed, our relationship continued to grow. Patricia invited me to her book club, where she introduced me as her daughter-in-law with genuine warmth. She asked for my opinion when redecorating a room in her house. She even started coming to some of my library events, sitting in the audience and applauding my presentations on local history. But the moment that truly showed me how much she had changed came 6 months after her health scare. It was Thanksgiving, and the entire family was gathered at the Hayes estate. Daniel and I arrived to find the house beautifully decorated with fall flowers and candles. Patricia greeted us at the door with warm hugs for both of us. As we sat down for dinner, I noticed something different about the table. There was a place setting at the head of the table, and beside the plate was a small card with my name on it. I looked at Patricia in confusion. She smiled. I thought it was time we made some changes to our traditions. Rebecca, you have been part of this family for over 7 years now. It is time you sat at the head of the table with me. I was so moved I could barely speak. In all our years of family dinners, I had always been seated somewhere in the middle, a subtle reminder of my outsider status. But now, Patricia was literally and figuratively giving me a place of honor. As we ate, Patricia raised her glass. I want to make a toast, she said, to family, not the family we are born into, but the family we choose to be, to second chances and new beginnings, and especially to Rebecca, who has shown me more grace and patience than I ever deserved. Everyone raised their glasses, and I saw Caroline, smiling at me with genuine affection. Robert nodded approvingly, and Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes shining with happiness. After dinner, as people were having coffee and dessert, Patricia pulled me aside into her study. She handed me a small wrapped box. "This is not a holiday gift," she said. "This is something I should have given you a long time ago." I unwrapped the box to find a beautiful antique bracelet, delicate and elegant. "This belonged to my grandmother," Patricia explained. "She gave it to me when I married Robert, and her mother gave it to her when she married. It is a Hayes family tradition to pass it down to the women who marry into the family." I looked up at her, my eyes filling with tears. "I should have given this to you on your wedding day," she said, her own voice breaking, "but I was too stubborn and too foolish. I am giving it to you now because you have always been worthy of it, and I want you to know that you are truly part of this family." She helped me fasten it around my wrist, and I pulled her into a hug. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." We stood there for a moment, and I realized that this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without its struggles and complications, but genuine and loving and accepting. When we returned to the living room, Daniel saw the bracelet on my wrist and immediately understood its significance. He looked at his mother with such gratitude and love that I thought my heart would burst. The rest of the evening was filled with laughter and warmth. We played board games, told stories, and for the first time since I had married into this family, I felt completely comfortable. I was not trying to impress anyone or prove my worth. I was just being myself, and that was enough. As Daniel and I drove home that night, I looked at the bracelet on my wrist, catching the light from the street lamps. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked softly. "I am," I said. "For the first time in a very long time, I am truly happy." He brought my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I am so proud of you. You could have walked away from my family after everything my mother put you through, but you gave her a chance to make things right. She did the hard work," I said. "She chose to change. That takes real courage." "You both did," Daniel said. "You were courageous enough to be vulnerable with someone who had hurt you. That is not easy." Over the next year, my relationship with Patricia continued to deepen. We developed our own traditions, like monthly lunches where we would try new restaurants and discuss books we had read. She started asking for my advice on things, valuing my opinions in ways she never had before. She also made efforts to get to know me beyond surface-level interests. She came to the library where I worked and spent an afternoon learning about what I did. She asked about my childhood, my dreams, my perspective on things. She treated me like a person worth knowing, not just an obligation she had to tolerate. There were still difficult moments. Habits do not disappear completely, and occasionally Patricia would say something that echoed her old attitudes. But now, when that happened, she would catch herself and apologize, and I learned to give her grace, to understand that change is a process, not an overnight transformation. Daniel's relationship with his mother also transformed. He no longer felt caught between the two women he loved. Instead, he got to enjoy watching us build something genuine together. One evening, about a year and a half after that fateful dinner where everything changed, Daniel and I were having dinner at Patricia and Robert's house. It was just the four of us, a quiet family meal. As we were finishing dessert, Patricia looked at me with a smile. "Rebecca, I want you to know something. Having you in this family has made me a better person. You have taught me about grace, about forgiveness, about what truly matters in life. You have taught me things too," I said, "about strength, about resilience, about never giving up on people." Robert raised his glass. To family, he said simply. We all clinked glasses, and I looked around the table at these people who had once felt like strangers, but were now truly my family. Later that night, as Daniel and I were getting ready for bed, he pulled me close. Do you remember that night when we walked out of my mother's dinner? He asked, when everything felt like it was falling apart. I remember, I said. I thought our relationship with your family might be over. I did too, he admitted. But look at us now. Look at how much has changed. I thought about everything that had happened. The confrontation, the apology, the health scare, the slow rebuilding of trust and relationship. It had not been easy, and there had been moments when I was not sure we would make it through, but we had. And not only had we survived, we had created something beautiful from the ashes of hurt and misunderstanding. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most meaningful transformations, I said. Daniel kissed my forehead. I love you, Rebecca Hayes. Thank you for not giving up on my family. Thank you for not giving up on us. I love you too, I said, and I would go through it all again if it meant we ended up here. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about the journey we had been on. 7 years of feeling like an outsider, followed by a confrontation that could have destroyed everything, followed by a slow, painful, but ultimately redemptive process of healing and growth. I thought about the bracelet that now lived in my jewelry box, a symbol of acceptance and belonging. I thought about the relationship I had built with Patricia, imperfect but genuine. I thought about how Daniel had stood up for me when I needed him most, and how that single act of courage had set everything else in motion. And I realized that sometimes love means having difficult conversations. Sometimes it means establishing boundaries. Sometimes it means walking away from a table where you are not respected. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it means getting a second chance to build something better than what was there before. I was one of the lucky ones. My mother-in-law had said I would never be family, but my husband spoke up, and everything changed. And now, finally, truly, I was home.